that you wrote and read for us, of the initial feeling of something approaching shame or embarrassment to what you now clearly feel, which is one of enormous pride and satisfaction. Why do you think we've come to that?
You know, up until the Vietnam War, this country basically pulled in the same direction, and the military was seen as something honorable. Since the 60s, my generation split, and there's part of that generation that served and some that didn't. And some that didn't came away either feeling guilty or bitter or still had real ideological antipathy toward the military. And out of that came a kind of a snobbery that says that if you're in college, the maid cleaning your room is far more likely to have a kid who will serve in the military than you are. And that's really a kind of an elitism that I don't think our country wants to talk about that much.
John, does that snobbery work in both directions? In other words, when you ended up in boot camp 3.5 years ago, a lot of the kids in there must have looked at you and said, where the hell did you come from?
Not so much, really. I actually, once I got to know them, I felt much more in common with those people than I did with anybody.
Well, I'm not talking about how you felt about them. I'm asking how they felt about you.
Well, actually, it was interesting. It was especially nice for me in boot camp because you don't really get much of a chance to have conversations with anybody for about the first 3 weeks or so. So by the time anybody actually found out where I was from, we were already so close it didn't really make a difference what I'd been doing with my life or, you know, how much money my parents earned or anything like that.
How do you feel about Congressman Rangel's proposal? And again, I said at the beginning of this broadcast that nobody really expects it to pass.
Right.
But how would you feel about a draft?
I think that the ideal of national service is an excellent one. However, from where I sit, when the rubber hits the road and you're in a combat situation and you get hit by a round and you look to your left and your right and you realize that the two people on either side of you don't want to be there, are not willing to be doing their job and may not be willing to risk their lives to pick you up and carry you the mile or so you need to get to a medic, that you're in real trouble. And I think that the ideal might, in this sense, put a lot of people in danger.
So from a very practical point of view, you'd rather be in an all-volunteer service than to have draftees on either side of you?
Absolutely.
Frank, we're on the verge of what may be a war in Iraq. Things look terrible in North Korea. And I'm very moved and impressed by all the wonderful things you've said. But as a father, I also know that if for some reason John were shipped over to the Persian Gulf next month, there have to be different thoughts that run through your head too. Right?
Yeah. You know, after the op-ed piece came out that I read the little excerpt from, I got a lot of letters from a lot of people, some from parents who had lost people killed in war. In fact, one parent of a ranger who was killed in Afghanistan in the beginning of our time there in that chopper rescue effort. And I'll tell you, you know, I read those names very carefully. I've cried over some of them because I see his face. It's tough. And I can't pretend different. It's really difficult. But I love this country. I'm a writer by profession. I have freedom to write what I want. And when somebody doesn't arrest me for writing that opinion, it's because there's guys like this who are putting their life on the line to defend it. You know, John and his buddies watch your back and my back while we sleep. You do this show in freedom because somebody's out there putting their back on the, watching your back. And we don't think of that enough. So nothing scares me more and nothing makes me more proud.
A last question to you both. The point that Congressman Rangel is making, and as I said at the outset, he doesn't expect the bill to pass. But the point that he is making is if more of men and women in Congress had sons and daughters who were facing the draft, maybe they wouldn't be quite as eager to get into wars. Maybe they wouldn't vote for them quite as easily as they do. Do you see any advantages to a draft in that sense, so that it's not just a guy like you who chooses to do it, but that every one of us who has children of that age has to confront the possibility that one of our sons and daughters may have to go?
I would like to think that our leaders would vote with their conscience regardless of whether they had any personal stake in it or not. I do think that they would be much more careful about what they vote for. However, as a Marine, I have the luxury of not making policy. I just have to enforce it. And I think I'm gonna stop there, if that's all right.
Yeah, you're not saying anything above your pay grade is usually a smart idea.
Very safe.
I thank you both.
Thank you very much.
John, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Frank, thank you
Thanks.
so much for joining me. I'll be back in a moment.